My name is Matt Brodbeck. I am a grateful, recovering alcoholic and addict. Um, I made the choice to get clean February 10th, 2024, and have been clean since that time. For me, man, I grew up. I grew up in a good household. Mom, dad gave me everything I needed. I didn't want for anything. I played sports. I was athletic. The one thing I did notice when I was younger, though, is that was a very emotional kid. And growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, like feelings and emotions from a male, especially, it just wasn't a thing. My dad, I've only seen my dad cry once or twice. So, with that being that, my dad never really said anything like, negative about that, but it's just something I noticed growing up. Like, I was all over the place, anger, tears, all that. And, you know, with being like that, it just made me feel like I don't fit in. I never felt like I fit in anywhere, I was a very mischievous kid. I liked to get into shit. And, that's just how I was. And, my childhood was good, though. My parents both loved me, treated me well. Around, fifth, sixth grade, they decided to get a divorce. And that emotionally, that wrecked me for a minute. But, getting through that, my parents both made sure I had equal time with both of them, and they still love me the same. Everything was fine with me. I excelled in school. I was one of those kids that didn't really have to study much. I just always got good grades. I, was athletic. But I always felt like I didn't fit in. So, growing up, getting a little bit older, my mom decided to get remarried, and she got remarried pretty quick after the divorce. And this period of my life, I was getting into high school, and my stepdad he was great until they got married, and then he just became like abusive. And, at that time too, I was about 15 years old. My dad found out he had cancer, and my dad, my dad's a strong man, never seen him kind of break like that. He was, worried about losing his life, and, rightly so. And I just remember, because this period of my time, I just had a lot going on, and I was all over the place. And I just remember going to a friend's house, and we got one of those bottles of liquor from Kroger's, those cheap bottles of liquor, and me and my friend started drinking it. And that was the first time that I caught a buzz from alcohol. And I actually remember vividly, like sitting in this bathroom, going, like using the restroom. And I remember thinking like, oh, I'm drunk. Like, I like this. And then I remember saying to myself, like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Like, I found my solution. Like, that's exactly what it was. It was a solution, you know. And from that point on, I drank and I partied with people, but from that point on, like, for me, it was more of a solution to my feelings. It would numb stuff out. It would make everything okay, especially going through those times in my life at that point in time. Like, it would make me really not have to deal with it that much. And that's how I got through those. My dad ended up beating cancer. My mom ended up divorcing my stepdad. But through those times, like, that's kind of what kept me, okay. It was how I got through that. And at an early age, like, alcohol was how I got through everything. You know, um, when I was 17, I ended up, with consequences for my drinking. That's when I started drinking every day. I quit the wrestling team. I was able to go to college for wrestling, and I ended up quitting the team my senior year. Just wanted to drink, and I wanted to work, and I had all these excuses, but really it's just, I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and sports wasn't it anymore. I got my first DUI when I was 17. Uh, you know, and for that they suspended my license, and and I would do stupid stuff. Like I remember one time I got drunk and went up to my high school for a cancer walk, and I decided to walk the other way on the track and smoke a cigarette at a cancer walk. Like it was just everything I've been in trouble for was just out of complete drunken stupidity, and I ended up getting arrested that night at school, getting, suspended. I wasn't able to go to prom. I wasn't able to, do things that high school kids do. And that was the beginning of the consequences of my actions when I drank. A couple of years after that, I had this girlfriend. She was my first love. And, first love, you think you're going to get married. You think this is how it's going to be. I found that person, but, it didn't end up working out. She ended up cheating on me. And I just remember that like devastating me. Didn't know how to deal with it. And the drinking wasn't really doing it for me. Like, it would just make me more sad at that point. So, I had some friends, and it was right about the time when, like, a lot of people were doing OxyContin, and my friend was like, here, you want to try some of this? And I'm like, yeah. And I did that. And what I remember about that is that just completely numbed it. Like, I was devastated. I did a little bit of that, and I didn't feel anything. And just for 4 or 5 hours every night, I just would do that, get numb, just to not have to feel that, pain of that heartbreak. Like, it was getting to the point where I didn't know how to deal with my feelings and emotions. And, that's what I did. And, it came to a point where I just got physically dependent on it. I was doing that every day. I was still drinking. I ended up getting my second DUI when I was 19, 2 years after I got my first one. And the judge, well, I got that DUI, and then I got a theft for stealing a bottle of liquor from Kroger's. And the judge was like, man, you might be an alcoholic. And that was the first time I heard that term is, alcoholic. And I mean, looking back at it now, like, yeah, not too many people, get 2 DUIs before they're 21. But he's sending me to a jail treatment program called Turning Point here in Cincinnati. And that's where I first learned about the disease that I suffer with, man. I even though I didn't stay sober after that, I was in there, and while I was there, like, if you would have asked me, I'm staying sober, I'm getting out, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And if you would have gave me a lie detector test, I would have passed it. Like, I did not want to drink when I got out of there. And it was about a week before I was getting out of there, the judge was like, okay, you can leave next week. You're doing really good. I just started having these thoughts come in like, well, I'm 19, like everybody, all my friends, they're going to be drinking, why stop when I'm this young? And I knew I was an alcoholic. Like, I knew that. But at that time, it's like, well, I'm still young. You know what I mean? Like, I still got some more drinking in me. All the way up to that week, though, man, I was done. But as soon as they gave me a whiff of freedom, like, my mind went right back to it. And it was, as soon as I got out of there, I started drinking again. And, I started getting heavy on the OxyContin. And for me, like, I always experimented with a lot of drugs as I drank. But the OxyContin, like, got a hold of me, man. Like, I started getting, physically sick if I didn't have it. And, I started, well, I was selling drugs just to support my habit. And, I would run out of drugs to sell, and then I would start robbing the people I was selling the drugs to. Like, it just led me into a lifestyle of, I don't know, it wasn't something that, if you would have asked me in second grade, like, yeah, I want to grow up and be a drug addict. Like, it's just something I fell into. And I started hurting everybody I love. And, 19, like, that's the age where it got bad, and it didn't really get better. And, until 15 months ago. I had my runs with coke, crack, all that, but the opiates, that was the one. And I remember they stopped making the OxyContin or whatever. Like they just stopped making them. And for me, I was around enough people to like, here, try this. And that was my first time doing heroin. And for me, I like to get obliterated with anything that I do. Like when I drank, I blacked out. I would go to parties and, I remember getting arrested out in Indiana, waking up in jail, calling my dad like, hey, I'm in the Justice Center, come get me. And people like, bro, you're in Indiana. And like, I had no idea. I didn't even remember going to Indiana. Like I like to get annihilated because, like I said, I just like to block out all feeling. And I hate to feel. And to be honest, I still hate those feelings. I just know how to deal with them in a constructive way. I know how to get through them. But, at the time, I did not. That was my only solution. And I mean, it just went on like that. And I was always able to, hold a job. I served in restaurants. I bartended. And it's quick money, so I could make my money, get out, and, do what I wanted to do. And, my father, he didn't really know how to deal with it. He knew, like, he thought if he didn't help me out, I would die. So, there was a lot of manipulation and stuff on my part. I kind of twisted my family up. My mom, was told to, the tough love to cut me off. And, if I were a parent like that, I can't even imagine how hard that would be to have to cut your own son off, knowing, what he's doing could get him killed, And about that time, 19 is where I had, one of my first friends pass away. He passed away from a fentanyl patch and died. And, that I remember saying, okay, that's it. Like, I'm done doing drugs. Like, this is fucked up. My friends are dying now. Sorry for cussing. My friends are dying now. And I don't know, that didn't do it. Like 2 days later, I was back out using. And I couldn't stop. Even when I wanted to stop, at that point, man, I just couldn't. I started, use intravenously, and it's just a progression, man. I would, I would use, and then I would try to go to like a methadone clinic, and don't get me wrong, like that methadone clinic saved my life. It kept me from dying, but then, I would start using different types of drugs. I would start using like Xanax or cocaine instead of the opiates. So, I mean, for me, it was like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Probably kept me alive long enough to where I could find recovery, and I'm grateful for that. But, man, I just didn't have a solution. I remember I was about 28, 29, and I was driving to the methadone clinic. I'd been up for a couple days doing, I think, meth, and I ate a bunch of Xanax the night before to try to sleep, and I didn't go to sleep. But, I was like, okay, well, I'll go to this methadone clinic, get my dose, go home, and then I'll go to sleep. And so I went to the clinic, and then on my way back, I passed out at the wheel and ran through somebody's yard, hit a mailbox, kept driving, and then smashed like a metal pole mailbox and, messed up my car, and, windshield was all messed up. And, I just pulled off and drove away. And, I pull up into my apartment, and a cop pulls up right behind me. Somebody followed me home, and, I got my third OVI that time. And once again, the judge, I think you're a drug addict, because now the alcohol I wasn't really drinking. It was, I kind of found what I wanted in the drugs that I like to do. And sent me to another treatment. So the second time in treatment, I'm in there and I'm never going to use again. Never going to use again. This is it. You know, I was a little chairman in the rehab, Mr. Gonna go out and succeed, and everybody believed me. Like, I had everybody fooled. I had myself fooled because I believed myself, and that's the first time I saw these people come in from 12-step fellowships, and they would bring these meetings in, and that was like, I was like, okay, maybe this is the answer. But judge tells me you're going to get out in a week. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to do drugs anymore. I'm just going to try to drink, because drinking's socially acceptable, forgetting about my time drinking and what it did to me. But hey, drinking's better than doing heroin. It's better than doing meth, So I got out, and that's what I did. I went to the bar the same day. They said, go to a meeting when you get out. And I was like, yeah, I'll go do that tomorrow. And went to the bar, and, 2 weeks later, I had overdosed. I was living with my fiance at the time, and this time I did a little bit of heroin, and my fiance found me out in the backyard, in the back driveway, like unresponsive, and she came down and she was screaming, and my neighbor was giving me CPR, and she was on the phone with my dad, and my dad's listening to the ambulance, the guys in the ambulance, like, well, we already hit him with 2. I don't think he's gonna make it. Like, just the damage that people like me do to our families, man. It's unreal. But the third shot of Narcan brought me back to life, and I'd like to say that was a wake-up call, but I went right back in the house and got high again. I didn't overdose this next time. I tried to go back to the methadone clinic, and I was on methadone and then still using, and then that happened all the way up, like, just working, getting my drugs, going home, doing my drugs. The fiance and me didn't work because I love drugs. I couldn't love anything like I love drugs. So relationships were out of the question for me. So I was using, and around, I don't know, about 3 years ago, man, my life just started getting miserable. I was in a little, what do they call it, efficiency apartment. I was living to get high, man. I was just living to get one more. And I would always try these things, like, I'm going to stop doing fentanyl because that's my problem. And then I'll start doing meth because it's cheaper. And then that last two years, I got highly addicted to the fentanyl and the meth. And for me, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because getting on thing like meth, like, it took me out, man. It took my mind to the point where I couldn't just go in and work. I don't know. It made me paranoid. It made me just hate myself, man. That last year, I couldn't even look in the mirror. I didn't want nobody taking pictures of me. I was 155 pounds and just miserable. I don't know. I just thought, like, this is what it's gonna be. Like, I'm gonna be miserable, and that's fine. Like, I'm used to miserable by now. I lived in that bottom, that just deep hatred for myself. I lived in that for a few years, and it had become where I became comfortable. And I picked up another charge. I was going to sell a bunch of weed. I was hitting a meth pipe, driving by a cop. I was oblivious. The cop just watched me just light it up right in front of them. They pulled me over, and they were just flabbergasted. Like, did you really not see us? The judge was like, all right, well, if you could pass the drug test, you'll be okay. And I just couldn't, and like I couldn't stop. I'd be like, okay, I'll stop 5 days before I got to go to court, and trying to finagle every way that I could, and couldn't do it. And I don't know. At this point, man, I was just so miserable. I was about to lose my job. I was renting my couch out in my little efficiency to somebody for like $400 a month, so I barely had to pay rent. And this person like was very hard to live with. Like it just, I backed myself into such a corner to where, man, I don't know. I just remember the week before going to treatment, I would hear things, man, coming from other people, and I just, it's such a haze to me, but I would hear, God, and I would hear Jesus, and I don't know if that's, me picking out what I wanted to hear, but, people just kept trying to talk to me about that, and at that point, I thought God gave up on me, man. I was, yeah, there was times I'd just wake up in the morning and I'd be like, fuck. I would just be mad that I woke up. I hated myself. I hated people. I hated what I became. And I just remember, somebody who had just recently went to treatment had me pick him up there, and I was about to lose everything, man. I had to beat myself up so bad to the point where, like, if I was out there for another couple weeks, I would not be sitting here right now. Like, my legs were swollen. I didn't have any veins left. Like, it was either get help or die for me. There was no other option. And honestly, man, I had no hope. But I decided to just check myself into treatment. At that point in time, I was physically addicted to, fentanyl, methamphetamine, and Xanax. It was every day. I had to have all of them. If I didn't have one, it was going to be a bad day. And I was so exhausted. And really, like, being able to lay down for a few days seemed like what's the worst that could happen. But I put myself in treatment February 10th, 2024. And I remember laying in that bed. I laid in that bed for 5 days straight. I didn't get out of the bed, man. And I just remember, like, day 4 or 5, I remember, and in my 12-step program, they say, you got to surrender. And that's what I did. I was like, God, I can't do this. Like, I can't. And I made a pact with God. I said, if you can help me get through this, I promise I will do whatever in my power to help your children that come behind me. Because, that's the thing. I've seen a couple of my friends in recovery that they're getting, their family back, and they're getting married, and man, that gave me a little bit of hope. And that's right now in my life, like, this is what it's about for me. Like, I want people to see, because people that know me know how bad I was. And I've had people come up to me like, if you can do it, man, maybe I can too. And and it's crazy because I saw the guy and I'm like, if this guy can do it, there's always one guy that you hung out with that's a little bit worse off. And, like, that was a big part of where the hope came from, man. I got out of bed after that prayer, the day after I made that prayer. And I remember being in treatment, just trying to make it through the day, man. I was exhausted. I couldn't stand for too long. And I remember another thing in there was they had this Bible study every morning at 9 a.m. And I remember walking up to the Bible study and just standing in front of the chapel, and I just couldn't go through the door. Like, I still felt like I didn't deserve to be there, and I didn't want to be there if I didn't fully believe. Like, I just, I turned around, walked back up to my room, and when I went in my room, on the nightstand, I saw the Lord's Prayer like on a piece of paper. And that was like the first thing I saw. And I walked in, and the Lord's Prayer just kind of fell to the ground. And I, read it. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go for it. I turned right back around, and I went in there. And the woman that was doing that, I went in there and I said, what I felt. I felt like I didn't deserve God's love. I felt like I didn't deserve His grace, any of that. And the person told me, like, all you need is the faith of a mustard seed, and it'll grow from there. And man, that and the 12-step meetings that they brought in every night, like that Bible study, being able to believe that maybe I am worthy of God's love, and that it was a game changer for me, man. It was something that I've never felt before. And in the program I work, it says that there's a God-sized hole left in you, and you try to fill it with everything else. And what I'm finding is, like, the spirituality aspect of it, it fills that hole for me. It's what gives me peace. And at that time, I didn't have peace. I didn't know how to get it. And these guys they bring these 12-step meetings in, AA, NA, they would bring those meetings in every night. And when these guys would come in, I would just, see like they were, laughing, and they were happy. Man, they had peace, like a peace like I didn't know was possible, especially for somebody that, like me, that just tried to numb everything out, man. Because by numbing everything out, I numbed out all the good stuff too, like all the happiness and joy. I didn't know what that felt like. And so even in treatment, to get a little bit of those things back, like happiness and genuine laughter, and man, that was addicting to me. Like where can I get more of that? Like, where can I find this peace that y'all have? And at that point, it was like I would do anything for this. And slowly but surely through that process, I started getting a little tiny bit more confidence in myself, building a relationship with God. I started praying. They told me when I was in there to get a sponsor, and I'm at the point where, like, I'll just, whatever you guys say, I'll do it. Whatever you guys say. Like, I don't want to go back to that. Like, that's certain death that way, And I had my times in treatment. There was one time I was sitting out in the little detox room till like 4 a.m. trying to talk myself out of leaving. Like, I wanted to leave, but like I knew if I left I was gonna die, and I was just in my head sitting there for hours, And the people at that program, man, they were patient with me, very patient with me. Because when the drugs were removed, man, my emotions were all over the place, laughing, crying, trying to fight everybody in the program. Like, I was such a mess. But that's where my foundation began, man. That's where I started to find a little bit, I wouldn't say peace, but like I knew where to find it then, And as soon as I got out of treatment, I did get a sponsor while I was in treatment. I got out of treatment, called my sponsor, and I started, working a 12-step program. He says, I wanted to know, and that's what they say, find a sponsor that has something that you want. And what I wanted, and what I still want, and I have, but I want to keep, is my peace. Like, I go to bed now, and I can drift off to sleep. Like, I don't know, I don't worry much. I don't know. I'm at peace. And most times I am at peace. But, I started working my steps. I dealt with all my issues with getting arrested for the, smoking the meth pipe, selling weed. I dealt with that. I went to jail 6 days after I got out of treatment. I got pulled over and went to jail for 20 more for that. which was probably good. I mean, I was locked up and I was away from all that stuff, but I started to clear up the wreckage of my past. And I continued thriving to build a relationship with a higher power, which I call God. Like, I've seen him show up in my life time and time again. Like, I was working in the restaurant industry for 20 years, and that's where I went back to when I got out of here, or when I got out of there. But, like, things just keep falling into my lap. Like, I had a guy, call me like, hey, man, I see what you're doing. You think you want to, come try to do this type of work? And so, I started remodeling homes. It's something that I never gave myself credit for doing. And if you would have asked me back when I was using, I would have just counted myself out. But, like today, like I face any type of fear I have, I try to face it. Like, that's the only way to beat that, is just to get through it. And, I did it, and I found out that I love doing that. I still do it now. And 6 or 7 months into my recovery, maybe 8, I had a buddy of mine that owns a treatment center call me, and he was one of my motivations for actually like cleaning up and changing my life. And he said, man, what you're doing is inspiring. He said, he told me that I inspired him, and he's like, you ever thought about working in a recovery field? And I was like, well, yeah, man, like I would love, and I do love, to help people like me, to see people with no hope start to get it, and then see them once they get out. Like, just, there's nothing better than that. Like, I would do that for free. I'd do that for free. So yeah, I would do that. And it's just these things in my life that I find is when I don't ask for things, like, God will give me what I need and what I didn't know I needed. And it's been 15 months, and I got some big things, big things about to happen in my life. Another great blessing from God. I don't want to talk about it now. Still got to tell my family about it, but God continues to show up in my life. And, I worked those 12 steps, and now I'm working people through those 12 steps. Like, that's what gave me my peace, clearing up that wreckage of my past, letting go of old resentments, making amends for the damage that I've caused. It set me free. And I do this one day at a time. I wake up and I ask God to help keep me sober, help keep me respectful, honest, caring. And I just try to live in God's will today, not mine, because when I live in God's will, beautiful things happen. And when I try to take my will back, usually I don't get the results I'm looking for. So I don't know, this whole process, for me, it's been about finding a higher power and believing in something bigger than me. And what I do now is I try to be an example for the people that come behind me, because I made that promise to God, like, if you get me through this, like, I will help your children get through it too. And it's what it's all about today. Like, it's what keeps me sober, is being able to help the next man and find that person get a little bit of hope and start, getting their life back and talking to their kids. Like, I wouldn't take anything back that I've done in my life, because if I did, I wouldn't be here right now. And, I'm still in sober living, and, I thought I had an apartment and a car, and I thought, like, oh, that's nothing. Like, I've found myself, this is the happiest I've ever been in my life, and I don't have my own apartment. I do have a car, but, like, I'm happy and I'm at peace. And for me, like, this is what life's about. And I believe that I will be provided for as long as I put the footwork in. And honestly, as long as I keep good in that promise I made to God when I was laying on that bed in Detox. And I don't know, man, life just keeps getting better. I don't want to go back, because I just want to see what happens next. It's so beautiful, and I'm just so grateful. You know, I can deal with my feelings today. I went through a breakup a couple months ago, and I didn't think I was gonna stay sober through it. And if you remember, like that's one of the things that got me really deep into doing drugs. And I was like, yeah, there's no way. There's no way. You know, I called my sponsor, and he said, Matt, he said, we're gonna get through this. He's like, you don't ever gotta do this shit alone no more. And I relied on God, and I relied on the people in my life, the support network that I built up over those 10, 11 months. I relied on them to get me through that, and they carried me through that. People were picking me up, taking me out. People were checking on me. So many people were checking on me. And, you know, it was just a breakup. But for me, like that, dealing with those feelings is something I didn't think was possible without a substance. And the fact that I was able to get through that, I believe that I can stay sober through anything now. Like my sobriety isn't conditional. Like I believe no matter what happens, I'll be able to get through it. And I'm just grateful, and that's all I got.